Good afternoon. I'm Ángeles Moreno, President of UPRERA, and this is the UPRERA Autumn Webinar, Women in PR. In the last 3 years, one of the most discussed topics in business and societies in general, and in the communication and PR industry in particular, has been the gender inequalities. Gender equality is the fifth Sustainable Development Goal of the United Nations, and UPRERA is fully committed with this advancement. Today, we will present the newest results from 2 UPRERA labeled projects, the Women in PR project and the European Communication Monitor. I will present myself the results about gender equality from the European Communication Monitor 2020, and Martina, leader of the project Women in PR, will present the second phase of this international study. We will have diverse cultural perspective from England with Dr. Topik, Croatia with Mirela Polić and Mirela Holly, from Georgia with Leli Bibilashvili, from Portugal with Maria Joao Cunha, and from Spain with Cristina Fuentes and Luisa Alli. Thank you to all the speakers and thank you to all the participants for assisting this session. We will have a question and answers and open discussion at the end of the session using the question and answer tool that you all have in your keyboard in the bottom right. I will start with a brief presentation of the chapter Assessing and Advancing Gender Equality of the European Communication Monitor 2020. You know, the Communication Monitor today are the most comprehensive study of the profession of strategic communication all over the world. And annually, the monitor focuses on some evaluations of the situation of female practitioners, and additionally, in some editions like this year, we go in depth on the gender topic. Industry reports and the most recent meta-studies corroborate that gender inequalities persist in the communication field. We have explored how gender equality achievements and the glass ceiling are perceived at the individual, organizational, and professional level throughout Europe. Gender issues remain a particular concern in an industry where 3 out of 4 departments and agencies in Europe employ more women than men, but still only 1 of 2 leaders are women. Over half of participants, over half of practitioners in Europe observed an improvement in gender equality in their own country. But disagreement arises when it comes to evaluate how much had been done. How much had been done to support female practitioners. Every second man believes enough had been done, while most women is a 45%, but it's the most big group in the survey, believe that it had not been enough. It have not been done enough. So it's a different perception from male and female practitioners throughout all the countries. As you all know, the glass ceiling refers to an acknowledged barriers that keep female practitioners from rising in the hierarchy. And I underline here acknowledged because still 32% of European communication practitioners deny the glass ceiling at any level. 42% acknowledge the problem at the professional level in the country, but only 22% assert it in their own organization or department. According to previous research, denials occurs in the field and it's most commonly seen in male practitioners. Our study shows that only 3 out of 10 male practitioners acknowledge the problem in the profession, and only 11% in their organization or department. In contrast, every third female practitioner believes they have been personally affected by the glass ceiling. When considering factors that perpetuate the glass ceiling in the profession, the results also corroborate previous research. The majority identify issues at the organizational level, mainly lack of flexibility to take care of family obligations and untransparent promotion policies. Barriers at the macro level are also identified, and mainly there are a lack of networks and programs for women in the associations, for example, and too few inspiring female role models. Yet at the individual level, despite that science explains differences today on educational, social and cultural factors and not in psychological or cognitive factors, still a 15% of practitioners blame the lack of motivation and competencies of female practitioners. This is mostly perceived by male practitioners than by female practitioners. Again, responsibilities from overcoming the glass ceiling are also placed at the organizational level for 65% of respondents. Nevertheless, CCOs and agency CEOs, the top managers in the field, tend to attribute some responsibilities to their professional communities and also to female employees. Results of this study reinforce that gender prejudice still persists in the field, in the profession in Europe, and the main factor for the glass ceiling are related to war-like balance conflict, and interventions are needed firstly from organizational and secondly from professional communities. As expected, we found solid differences depending on the countries and regions, and some divergences regarding the kind of organizations and the position of practitioners. You are invited to download the free report and explore this detailed analysis at the European communication websites. And you can also explore the rest of the topic in the 2020 edition that had to be with gender, for example, regarding the salaries of male and female practitioners through the different countries. Okay, that's the main, a brief presentation of the results we have in the European Communication Monitor this year. And now I'll give the floor to one of the most, young, prominent researchers of the European PR landscape, Martina Topic.
Okay, I'm not sure about that. Hello, everyone. I'm Martina Topic. I'm a senior lecturer in public relations at Leeds Beckett University in England. I've been living in England since 2014, and all my research is on England in the past 6.5 years. I'll be leading this project now for 2.5 years, and it ends in August next year. But I will also apply to turn it into a network and continue the research. So if you would be interested in joining in the future, that is absolutely possible, and please do email me. Let me just share my screen. Should be okay now. No. Today I wanted to present I want, Angeles, are you still sharing the screen?
No, we cannot see. No, no. I closed. I thought I closed mine. Let me see again. No, I'm not sharing. So you should be able to do it.
Okay, I think I managed.
Yeah.
Can you see my screen? Yeah. Okay. So I will just briefly now present UPRERA project Women in Public Relations, just partners, aims of the project, and then first literature review report we've done. And then I'll also briefly present my original findings on experiences of women in public relations in England, which I've done in April and May this year. So the project basically started on looking generally into experiences of women in PR. Obviously, this is not a new topic. It's been around since 1980s when Professor Klein published the Velvet Ghetto report, which was the first report on experiences of women in public relations. And there's been quite a lot of work, actually. The theory and the works in public relations scholarship are very rich. I also do research in advertising and journalism, and I have to say that the theory and the engagement of scholars is much richer in public relations than in other communications industries. So we wanted to look at how much has changed since the Velvet Ghetto report. Don't forget that Velvet Ghetto report is produced in the United States in a context which is very much different than the one in England, for example, or in many European countries. And they predominantly use liberal feminism, whereas in Britain and some European countries we've been developing and drawing from the radical feminist theory as well. So we wanted to look at the position of women in PR, some challenges and opportunities for women, and also something I've been researching for a while now, which is called blockification. So this is basically something that draws from cultural masculinities, and I'll be looking to what extent women who embrace culturally masculine patterns such as behavior and communication are more likely to succeed in the industry. And I've started this with research in journalism because I come from journalism background, and then I expanded it on advertising and now also on public relations. And also we wanted to look at preferences in regards to work environment by women. So do they prefer to work for other women? What is the difference between female and male bosses? How women lead, what they like in regards to leading. And this is leading to the difference approach in feminism, which also argues that because of the socialization process, women and men have different interests and lead and behave differently. So partners of the project, other than UK or England, with me only at the moment, we also have Croatia, France, Spain, Portugal, Georgia, Slovenia, and then also this year, Talia Beckett from North American PR Association joined for US and Canada. And also we have our colleague from Saudi Arabia who joined this year as well. So it's quite a diverse spread of countries participating in the project. We've already published the literature review report, where we analyzed all the literature from 1980s to 2019. So a bit more than 200 articles that have been published in languages of the project. Most of it is in English, so there is a bit of a Western bias in the literature review. In particular, Americans have been most active in publishing this work, but a lot has been done in Europe as well. This is the link to the report, which I can share these slides if someone is interested and you can find it. It's publicly available via Liz Beckett website. And this is just briefly some of the findings from that literature review report, where we mapped all themes in the research and everything that has been done from 1980s onwards. So we found lots of liberal feminist perspectives that focus on research on glass ceiling and the pay gap and the work discrimination. Then we also found works on radical feminist perspectives, which look more into diversity and women's distinctiveness. So are women different than men and how this plays out in the organizational context? Also some works on intersectionality, and we found a strong criticism of liberal feminism. And also, interestingly, there is lots of work on theory development, which is again something that is not as present in other communication fields, but it is in PR. So, for example, works on professionalism, organizational theory, and also a feminist theory of PR, which is being developed by several scholars, including Elizabeth Oth, Linda Alduri, and other scholars, but it's again in the US. We also published one paper from the first report, so that first report is hundreds of pages long because we did a big literature review, and we also put our data and tables on how we analyze the literature so that maybe it can be used in other projects. but there is also a paper which is a shorter version published with Journal of Communication Management as well. Sorry. So now in the second phase, we are doing national country reports. So far, we released the report on England, which I've done in April and May this year. And then Croatia has released a report and Georgia. So we do have already 3 case studies. And we have more case studies coming up. The first ones that will be released soon are Spain and Portugal. And we have colleagues from Spain and Portugal who will tell you very exclusive findings of the project, because this has not been released yet. So the focus of the original research we are now doing in this second stage is on lived experiences, which is not a new area, because, like I said, from 1980s onwards, there has been lots of work on this. We just did like a new attempt to understand what is going on in the public relations industry at present. And then also office culture and leadership, which are 2 less researched areas in public relations scholarship on women in PR. I'm sorry. The theory we used is Bourdieu's theory of habitus. So we are looking at how women basically work in organizations, what issues they face, and whether organizations are still a culturally masculine world in which women have to be blockish or masculine to succeed, whereas those who are feminine potentially fall off the ladder. And this is the stuff that we've been looking for. And this is then also linked to the different approach in feminism, such as, for example, from Deborah Tannen and other scholars who've been discussing for decades now that women, because of the socialization process, and this is something that Bourdieu also discusses, do not always fare well in the organizational world. So in this office culture, for example, it's very interesting because we looked at banter, social interactions, who do women speak with, who they spend time with. So we got some really interesting findings. And in the leadership, we also looked at the socialization process. So we looked at early experiences, such as who women spend time with when they were growing up, when they were little girls, which parent, did they play with boys or girls, and then we were linking this to their experiences in the organizational world. So as for England, the first findings, in regards to lived experiences, I did find that this concept of blockishness, which means women who embrace behavior and communication that normally comes natural to men because of the socialization process, is actually working in the PR context in England. And the main themes would be that women still face some sort of sexism. There is also cultural masculinity in organizing work. So basically, you are expected to demonstrate the toughness, for example, lack of emotion, and all these characteristics that come naturally to men. There are expectations on personality and personal appearance, which women have been reporting as problematic. And there is, unfortunately, the queen bee syndrome, which means women who are blockified in a way and who got high and succeeded in a masculine world, but then they pull ladders up and do not help other women as well, which has been reported in the research. For office culture, situation slightly better. So there is a concept of depatriarchalization of public relations, where women reported that they don't feel they're excluded from business decisions because of their gender, and they no longer face expectations in dress code, which could be seen as patriarchal, which was the case before. So more senior women would say, yes, in the 80s or in the 90s, there was this issue, I had to wear a dress, I had to be pretty, but this has changed. And they often quote the Me Too movement as particularly helpful. And then the other theme that came up in the responses from participants was gendered organizations, which means the networking is still a job requirement. Also, PR is often seen as fluffy, and PR women called comms girls, which is a bit demeaning, because if you look, for example, as some woman said, a finance director, he won't be called a finance guy or a finance buddy or something like that, seen as more serious, and finance, at least in England, is traditionally a masculine domain. And also, there is a difference between male and female offices. So offices where there are more women tend to be more inclusive and more friendly for other women who work there as well, rather than masculine offices where the banter is more masculine. And then also, in terms of socialization, it appears strongly from the data. This is based on 24 interviews. That socialization with girls often means that women who are socialized with girls will develop feminine leadership styles and prefer to work for feminine women as leaders. whereas those who were socialized with boys prefer masculine leadership style and prefer to work for men. So there is this strong polarization that appeared in my results for England at least. And then also when it comes to leadership, many women actually reject blokish women, and they say, you know, I might as well work for a man if I'm going to work for this tough and emotionless woman, which was really interesting. And socialization seems to predict based on this. Again, this is a qualitative research, it's not a large national survey, but it seems to predict on leadership style. And also seems to predict leadership preferences. So if they're socialized with girls, they're gonna prefer feminine women and vice versa. But also there are some double standards for women as well. So from one point, they need to be as tough as any man, but then they need to also manage and be feminine at the same time. So this is really seen as really difficult. And this is the final thematic then analysis of the report when I put all three sections together. And it seems based on my findings that public relation industry, basically the organizations can be seen as gendered and deeply embedded into cultural masculinity. And this cultural masculinity is manifested in practice through blokishness, gendered offices, and also gendered leadership preferences. So as for further outputs, we are developing individual papers from our work already submitted to for publication. And I'm editing a book, Women and Leadership in the Public Relations Industry, an International Perspective, which is contracted with Routledge. So each report has three sections, lived experiences, office culture, and leadership. And then this leadership part will be turned into a Routledge book, whereas the others will be published in individual papers. And we are planning a comparative paper once everybody completes their work. These are my contact details. You're welcome to contact me with any questions. You can ask questions today as well, or get in touch if you would like to be involved with the project in the future. I hope I wasn't too long. Thank you for listening. And I will give a floor now to my colleague, Leli Bibilashvili from University of Georgia, who can tell us a little bit about her findings from the Georgian context. So Leli, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Martina. Once again, greetings from the University of Georgia. So I am, I represent the University of Georgia, the School of Social Sciences, Associate Professor in Communications. So let me share with you our presentation, and I will begin to share the findings that we had in regard to this research project. First of all, I'll just briefly state what was the purpose of the research. So this research aimed at identifying the attitudes of women employed in the field of public relations towards career development and success opportunities in regards to gender. So the research explored also what is the view of interviewed women on the career advancement opportunities of women in the public relations industry compared to men. Do women consider a balance between professional success and successful family life possible? And do their gender or stereotypes about female and male abilities hinder a woman's success? We were also interested to determine what women employed in the PR field consider essential skills for a manager and whether they consider themselves to have such skills. So for this reason, to achieve these goals, we conducted qualitative research. Namely, we conducted in-depth interviews. Target was women who work in leadership positions, and 10 interviews were conducted with them, and 9 interviews were conducted with women in employee positions. Duration was 30 to 40 minutes, and for maximum transparency and awareness of the research results, we had structured the report by segments and conducted an analysis both separately and in combination in the form of comparative analysis. And now I would like to present what were the key findings and highlights that the research data revealed. The process of socialization stigmatizes gender differences and determines the attitude of each gender towards the stereotype. The figuration of men among the agents of primary socialization already in adulthood changes the degree of communication of PR leaders and subordinates with the masculine environment uniquely. Although clearly none of the interviews mentioned the advantage of working with the male employees or bosses, from the conversations with some of them, there is still a hidden subconscious desire to work with the opposite gender. This naturally is influenced by gender stereotypes. However, ultimately, this still determines their attitude towards the opposite gender. The data also revealed that there is a striking trend where all of our interviewees believe that career advancement and successful family life are possible at the same time. They say because they are well aware of real difficulties that come with building a career in parallel with effective family management. Most importantly, obstacles to career advancement are not related to their gender. However, we cannot fail to mention here the opinion of some of them, according to whom with family cohabitation, career advancement is possible, but unlike men, it is considered very difficult. This attitude is similar to the position of women in employee positions and is characteristic of patriarchal society, where it is still believed that the main burden of family caregivers falls on women. Despite the stereotypical views observed during the research process regarding the factors hindering the success of women and the role of men and women, the female and male professions which still exist in the consciousness of the public, including women employed in the PR sector, and naturally consciously or unconsciously influences their views. The main and positive findings of the research are clearly the tendency according to which, in the first place, women do not see PR as a male profession. They do not feel uncompetitive when competing with men, especially for gender reasons. Again, under the influence of stereotypes, it is believed that career advancement is easier for a man, but nevertheless, they believe that career advancement in general is associated with many difficulties. Based on these positive findings, we can assume that women in the PR sector are less at risk of developing and achieving their career success, although for the next phase of the study, it would be interesting to see the dynamics of changing gender stereotypes and their areas of influence. This will allow us to talk about the problems caused by gender stereotyping in the PR sector as well as in Georgian society in general, and possible ways to eliminate these problems. So here are the associations that our respondents had on male and female managers. So they perceive male managers as loyal, that can listen to an opinion and comfortable to work with, and look down on women. But female managers are perceived as focused on details, attentive, easy to communicate with, and more empathetic than men managers. So when looking at all views on women managers from employees and managers' perspective, we identify an interesting situation. In terms of employees, women do not see men or women managers as role models and have a tendency to see themselves as better skilled. They also do not equate good managerial skills with what is traditionally perceived as masculine. On the other hand, women managers state they have more open communication with women employees and describe their managerial style in what is usually perceived as feminine, attentive, team-oriented, but also show some masculine characteristics when they say they are also tough but fair. However, despite these characteristics, they report they are less respected and less listened. Nevertheless, their managerial style is linked to their upbringing, which they described as democratic but also strict. So that's what I wanted to briefly state and briefly present in terms of research findings. But of course, the research itself is quite thorough, and more details are provided in the report itself. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Leli. I would like to now give the floor to Maria Joao Cunha from University of Lisbon, and so she can talk through first results from Portugal.
Well, thank you. First of all, I just want to share my, one second, please. Okay. Okay, so just to mention that for now, as Martina said, we are completing our report. So what I'm bringing to you today is our preliminary results for now, and we have some preliminary conclusions as well. This is our work is not only mine. This work is from me and from my colleague Carla Cruz. We are under a terrible workload of classes, and she has to be teaching right now, so she's not here with me. We also had help from some master degree people who helped conducting interviews as well. Just a few notes on Portugal, because we are a small country with around 10 million people, and particularly regarding the PR profession. Ever since the 1970s, women have been dominant in this area. So, of course, before the 1970s, I don't know if you are aware of our history, but until 1974, we were under a dictatorship. So that's why women were still, we had this lemma, which was like women, country, and family. So women were basically at home. And it wasn't until the end of this dictatorship in 74 that more and more women came to work outside, and therefore this profession is no exception. So, and to this day, women are predominant in this profession. Of course, that regardless of this, we also face, as in many other countries, issues of equity regarding promotions. So the so-called glass ceiling, salaries, work-life policies that still seem to reveal discrepancies between men and women, and some of the studies that have been conducted in our country have proven this as well. As for big data on this, for example, the gender pay gap, we have a recent study that has been conducted in our research center that showed that overall in Portugal, there are big differences, as you can see, between women and men, which translates. And when we move up on the social scale, so more in more leading positions, women tend to earn even less than men. So this difference gets bigger as we move up on the scale. As for, so it's difficult both ways. It's difficult to get there, and then when you get there, you just get less pay than men. And then also this issue of family care, working weekly hours per sex and age. So in the family, there is also, regardless if we are talking about younger women, or this rush hour is women between 30 and 50s years old, okay? In late life, it's until retirement age. So women in their active life with a profession still are this, have this burden of taking care of their families much more than their male counterparts. As for the project, we've conducted 19 interviews on PR women in Portugal, 8 of them in leadership positions. These interviews were conducted we started late March and then until July, because then we had this confinement, we had the pandemic, and in Portugal we started by being locked up. So they had to be conducted online, by email and by telephone, but it took us a bit longer than we expected because of all these constraints. In terms of the interviews, they were quite varied. in terms of positions. So we have 2 PR specialists, 3 consultants, 1 trainee, 2 managers, 2 press officers, 3 heads of public relations, 1 head of corporate affairs, 1 public affairs specialist, 1 board advisor. But we also believe that this array could be interesting in terms of bringing more varied and in-depth views of their expectations and perspectives. Their age, we had 8 of them under 30 years old, 4 of them between 30 and 40, and 6 over 40. Although the maximum age of our interviewees was 52 years old. We have 4 of them with master degrees and 15 with bachelor degrees. And then we also have different types of industries, which is also interesting for results. We have selected a few major items on which to focus on our analysis, and we brought some of the quotes from the interviewees themselves. So as for the formal communication style, for example, younger interviewees say that they think they are trying to be more assertive, they are quite thoughtful. Some of them say they are very direct. This direction forward to being more direct, being more extroverted, perceived as being more successful is a bit common, especially when we get to older women. As for informal communications, they more or less all say that they speak more with other women in their workplace about other things rather than work, although most of them say that work is the leading issue, even when they are in an informal environments. So this is it. So they say inevitably they speak of work, they talk about everything, but still we found that there is this idea that we can talk about everything regardless if we are talking with men or women. But for example, one of them that has this experience in a bigger agency, she said that there was a distinction between the conversations we could have when they were just women or when men were around. And we find it interesting that there is this socially accepted idea that this is natural, so that there is a distinction between talking to men and talking to women, and that matters are going to be different, and this is natural and accepted, as one of them says. An older woman says that women talk more about family than men, and also about personal care and beauty rituals. So we find here some stereotypes that these women still present. As for working with men or women, some of them say they have no preferences, especially younger ones, although one of them, for example, says that she'd rather work with women. So she says that she had established more empathy with a woman who was her director, while in two other agencies led by men, the experience wasn't as positive. So overall, she says the experience was not more positive or negative because the management was female or male, but in the middle, she says that for her, a more positive experience was with a woman who was a director. Then, for a matter of career-life conciliation, our interviewees say that female leaders can be a model. However, and this is interesting because it comes from a 25-year-old woman who doesn't have her own family yet, so she doesn't have children yet, but she says that she observed in her female director this inability to cut off from work and because her director had been pregnant, and she says that she didn't fulfill her maternal leave, so she left the maternal the leave for the parents, for the other parents, and because of the work. So it's interesting that even when they are younger, they recognize that being a woman in a leadership position in PR may compromise these decisions. For example, another interviewee, a bit older, say, well, some yes, others not. I see myself in some of these characteristics, especially social skills regarding her director, female director. And these are the skills I recognize, but some of them she says she doesn't identify with. Then in terms of their self-style for management, they say I'm assertive, I like to share, another one. So they are a bit divided in terms of being feminine or being assertive and feeling that they have to be assertive. They have to. So what we find mostly in these interviews is that sometimes women leave it like in a subtle discourse, not openly stating this, but subtly there is this idea, especially that things are what they are, and that they must comply with this male, the typically male style leadership. This was perhaps the most common issue with our interviewees, which is the work-life unbalance. So they are all complain with spending much more time at home, at the office than at home, that it's a very demanding profession, that to have a family, they should have a support system. And we see here what all of them state. While one of them says, well, it depends on the PR, working in agencies is more demanding and requires a lot of dedication to be able to progress. And they all say that it's not easy to match a career with building a family. In terms of progressions and expectations, while some of them recognize that women have more difficulty than men, many of them say, oh, I don't think they have to demonstrate more than men. What people expect is that they have a stronger attitudes and then they should be true leaders. So what we believe...
Excuse me, can I interrupt you? We are very late on our timing, so
okay,
you can finish your presentation.
I'll move on. I'll move on. So in terms of blockage, I'll just have to state this. So one of the interviews say that they fit more into the stereotypes of blockage. So there is some people who really recognize this. And in terms of conclusions, preliminary conclusions so far, what we've seen is that age and experience really matter. So younger, less experienced persons and the oldest in leadership positions perceive, or at least they say they perceive, more gender equality. Older in higher leadership rankings have a perception of more gender equality. Older women tend to communicate with both men and women. Women under 30 consider age more discriminating than gender, which is also interesting. But they all agree on this. So the importance of networking for career development and networking with other women. This question that I've seen happened in other countries as well, the expectations of being well-dressed for clients, working more than 8 hours per day and weekends, a consciousness of being difficult to have families, and having more feminine leadership characteristics, although some of the women didn't seem to understand that there was in fact a difference. Well, for now, thank you. I'm sorry we're taking a bit too long, but as we are in this exploratory stage, we get a bit excited about this. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Joao. And now finally, Cristina and Luisa from Spain will present and comment on findings from Spain.
Thank you. One moment. Sorry. Oof, one moment, please. Hi. Hi, one moment. Okay. Good afternoon. We are grateful to participate in this webinar presenting the research Women in PR in Spain. We also bring only preliminary results. I am Cristina Fuentes, and together with Ángeles Moreno, we have led the research in Spain. I will now leave you with Luisa Alli, who is CCO of IKEA Spain and DIRCOM board spokesperson of Commitment. Luisa not only participated in the research, but also helped us in the selection of the sample. Luisa?
Thanks a lot, and thanks Ángeles and Cristina for connecting us and let the professional ones being here. It's an honor for me to be in the academia. So I will try to do my best. Just to frame a bit the conversation is in Spain with Ángeles and Cristina. We already had another study like 1.5 years ago or 2 years ago. It was called GenderCom. And some of the highlights I can see in different countries, but also highlight in this study in Spain, especially the pay gap, the glass ceiling, and then the huge conflict because of the stress and the working hours needed to balance the work-family approach. So that also came 2 years ago in Fram study. So that's why in DIRCOM we are super keen to keep building on that part. We want really to approach to make the awareness between the professionals, but also we really want to create a very constructive approach to assure that we support the PR women and the PR men to cope with this situation. So thank you very much for giving me the pleasure to share this part of the investigation. So my support is not so big. It's just that I try to find perfect candidates for the investigation because of the professional profiles and the companies they were represented. So the interviews had been 22, 10 female communication leaders and 8 female employees of these female leaders. And also we had 4 female employees of male communication just as a control group. So what the researchers are highlighting here, and I'm very happy for that, is because the quality of the interviews. We really had an effort to assure that these leading women were quite representative from the PR sector in Spain, because their profiles and also because of the companies they were working for. So there is a nice mixture between national companies and international multinational ones. What we are super happy also is that the academia and DIRCOM has come together to this research to assure that then after the awareness and the communication after of this study will take place, and we'll try to make this study as big as possible, because we really have a commitment with equality and diversity in DIRCOM. And also because it lets you have this comparison between female leaders and female employees. And then probably I'm not the expert one, but probably Ángeles and Cristina will be able to share with us the key issues that appear from this conversation. Click, please, Cristina. Well, I mean, what features from the female leadership in Spain is that most of us, let's say, I include myself, have a considered style of communication. And also we are based on, we were grown up on a democratic parental model, but very strict in terms of educational responsibilities. And probably, I mean, you will be able to read between the lines, but probably it has a super interesting insight in this result. So please click. So more than half of them claim that their leadership style is based on empathy, encouraging autonomy, and trust in the team. And it will be super nice to check how it works with the male leaders. And also a total of the sample indicates that her leadership is linked to her style of communication and very connected with our background, both personal and professional. And then the relationship between self-perceived and objective leadership is that female leaders self-qualified with emotional, people-sensitive, and non-aggressive leadership. So it's quite connected with theoretical approaches to the new leadership. And also they're supported by their female employees who really value their female bosses with the same qualifications.
We have found two limitations. The first of these is that there are issues that need to be answered more thoroughly in order to make a correlation. This begins the case of relationship between leadership and family education. Secondly, women employees are asked whether they consider themselves to be black woman or stereotypically female. Previous research in Spain indicates that this question should be divided into 2 or 3 variables, and a statistic model generated from the answer. In such a way, it's not advisable to ask only one direct question. Faced with the question, female employees feel rejected and prefer not to answer or claim to be very feminine. Briefly conclusion, we have come to the following conclusion. First of all, the model of empathetic leadership sensitive to the team based on a considerate style of communication is observed in female leaders in the communication sector in Spain. Secondly, in this leadership model, women leaders are aware of their type of leadership, and it is supported in this way by their family employees. Therefore, it is considered a strength for the project to interview the female leader and her female employee from the same company. And thank you.
Thank you, Cristina and Luisa. I would like to open a floor for questions from our participants, if there are any, or any comments. We have 26 participants who joined us today. So would anyone like to say something or ask or comment from their own research, anything? No questions for now? While we wait to see if someone is maybe typing something or trying to ask, I just wanted to ask those of you who participated in the webinar, if you read any work from any country that has been released so far, 3, or if you read in the future, and if you use it in any way, either as a teaching material or if you use it in your professional work, I would be very grateful if you could let me know. And the reason I'm asking is not because I just want to know whether something I've done has been used. It's because in England we have something called REF, Research Excellence Framework. So we need to demonstrate every 5 to 7 years to the government what impact our research made. So in case you used it in any way, that would be very beneficial for us at Leeds Business School and Leeds Beckett. So if you do something with it and you remember them, please let me know. Okay, there is a question. What type of stereotypes were found? Sandra Ortega, would this be for Spain? Cristina, do you want to answer this?
Ángeles.
Sorry, I can see the question in the question and answer. It's in the chat.
What types of stereotypes were found?
Well, we found a stereotype in the assumption of what kind of communication style, for example, are expected from women and for men. It is also, as our colleagues before expressed it from other countries, we found that it's natural for employees to say that they have to talk differently for female or male leaders. So this is, and we found this kind of stereotypes on the communication style that is expected from the leader depending on the gender. And we also found, well, we have also found some stereotypes in the in previous studies regarding, for instance, there are some clear barriers linked to war-like conflict and to the selection of people for leading in the top positions.
Okay, there, Sandra also told us it for England as well. Well, the one I found was this comms girls and fluffy PR. So it seems that it's a little bit different in PR in England than it is in advertising or journalism, for example, in a sense that the whole profession is stereotyped in a way. So it's seen as very lightweight, something that is not very relevant. You know, it's the communication that's fluffy, that's easy. You know, we just say when you write up something and you present us and make us look good. So almost like PR is something that makes companies and things look pretty. But then what many women I interviewed actually recognized and said, well, would this be the same for finance? Nobody says that for finance. Nobody says that for any other field. It's just this field which is so heavily dominated by women. And I say, oh, it's fluffy. It's not good. So that was one I found. And then previously in the literature, we found some other studies that said women are not teamwork players, you know, they don't know how to work in teams. They should be in these technical positions because they have better communication skills. So these are the stereotypes we've found. And I see also a question from Santana, who says this project is very interesting. What are going to be the future lines of research bearing in mind these conclusions? So once we finish all of this, these country reports and publications, we haven't discussed the next step yet, because I just don't want to pile up workload on people because they have to finish this first. But I've been considering looking in, maybe asking partners that will look into women in crisis, because crisis comms is also an essential part of public relations, but not much has been done. So that's one line of research that I've been considering maybe, but I will be, I mean, I'm the leader of the project, but I'm not a despot. We discuss things and agree on them. So we will be discussing this once we finish with this, and then if someone else joins, you can also join the discussion. And Isabel Ruiz says, what have been the main difficulties on projects? So for my part in England, I really haven't had any difficulties. There's been so much willingness to participate in the project, and the lockdown has made it easier because women work from home now, so they don't feel like, you know, the boss will see me giving an interview, and it was really easy. But I'll let the others say if they had any difficulties. My experience has been fantastic.
Martina, I will add, I will answer to Isabel. In Spain, the more difficult thing is to really arrive to the top leaders. We have a schedule for interviews during the month of June and July, and we have actually finished our interviews last week because it's very, very difficult to have a meeting to stop these leaders in very top positions, especially in these difficult times, for half an hour to talk to them.
Yes, I would just say the same as my colleague from Spain just said. We had the same problem in reaching high leadership positions because it's very complicated, and then during the confinement, everyone was just completely full with all the job tasks, and many of these women also complained that it was even harder to conciliate work and life during the pandemic. So all women said it's much worse now, and perhaps that's because we didn't get as many interviews as we expected. So we finished in July because we had to put a stop eventually.
Leli?
In case of Georgia, so we didn't have much difficulties because like Martina, we had also lockdown, and during this pandemic situation, it was much easier to reach the respondents, and they were really very like involved and always eager to participate in the project. So the only constraint, I think, that it was the in-depth interview, it was the qualitative research. So the main constraint of the research was that we cannot generalize the data, and we cannot generalize it to the general public. So the main constraint and difficulty was this. Otherwise, we didn't have any difficulties during the research process.
Yeah, so very different experiences. I don't see any other oh no, there is here, just a second, on questions and answers. Did you found in your research the digital skills in PR area are a source of inequalities between men and women? For England, no. Would any of my colleagues want to comment on this?
In our case as well, so we didn't have any inequalities. So the main burden, the main challenge that the women were facing was that they are still like perceived as the main family caregivers, and the main family duties fall on them in that sense. So that's why they have some, it's really challenge for them to balance the work and success, to work on success and to achieve success, and to also be really involved in the family as the main player and as the main caregiver.
There is another question from Selsan or Selkan, I'm not sure I'm pronouncing, I'm sorry. If I understood correctly, there are still countries that are becoming part of the project. Will there be a chance to be a part of this study still from other countries? Yes, we are now doing these reports. Some of us have done it and the others are coming out soon. And then the project ends, but I have applied to continue this as a network, and then we can accept other participants and agree on next stages of the project. If you would like to collaborate, just send me an email and I have a list so I can add you, and then I'll get in touch next year. I don't see any other questions. Would there be anything else anybody wants to ask? Thank you very much generally for participating. We couldn't do this without you. If there are no other questions or comments, then thanks everyone for participating. It's been a pleasure to do this webinar. This is the first time I've done webinar in my life, so I hope it was okay. And thank you. Thanks for the participants in the webinar and my colleagues for joining us today.
Thank you very much for joining this webinar, speakers and participants. It has been very interesting to see the different perspectives from different landscapes. And I will remember participants that you will receive a questionnaire to evaluate the quality of the webinar. Thank you very much, and keep in touch with the next EUPERA autumn webinars. Thank you.